please give a warm welcome to one of my favorite writer-directors, Richard Curtis.
I think that's my wife shouting at the back, by the way. I don't actually have a fan of that level of intensity, but there we go.
Come on, we could. I mean, I told you on the, outside that like every year I have to watch Love Actually several times, And you won a monopoly on Christmas now, so it wasn't enough that Love Actually, now you do an animated Christmas movie.
It is strange that, isn't it? I mean, I think perhaps I am becoming increasingly obsessed by the community in which I live and sort of family and how that all fits together. And so more and more, I think of Christmas as the quintessential place for that. We live in a town very like that.
Suffolk.
Yeah, we live in a town called Walberswick, which is next to another town called Southwold, and the movie is sort of a fusion of those two. And we have a barn, and at Christmas, 35 of us all have lunch together in the barn and stuff. So it's all, Christmas has become a sort of actually very close to my heart and my sense of what life is.
I think you alluded to something that I wanted to ask you is like, you've made a career of, your films are usually, a young woman meets a man, but you're a family man with kids, and now finally you write a story about kids.
That's a very good question. So often we spend our creative lives 40 years behind our experience, do you know what I mean? So I was still writing about boy meets girl when I, had children, and I really loved, one of the things I loved most about this was catching up, was trying to write something. In fact, a bit late because my kids are now like in their 20s. But so much of my experience of the last 20 years is to do with children, raising children, how they behave, what they think of us, how they're lonely, what they think of each other. So I was delighted to be able to do it. And I think in animation it's particularly rich because it's hard finding brilliant child actors. But in an animated film, they can keep coming back. You can work on it endlessly. You get a brilliant performance out of them, which is drawn by someone else. So I think in some ways, if I was ever going to make a movie mainly about children, animation is a perfect venue for that.
You alluded earlier, you mentioned community, and one of the heartwarming things both about Love Actually and this film in particular is that at the end you emphasize the importance of community and friendship and love. Can you tell us about that aspect?
Well, I think, it's quite an interesting thing. It was my birthday. I know I had a nice haircut, so I don't look a day over 66. But I'm actually 68. And as you get older, you appreciate more the world that you, as it were, sit in rather than the world you're going out to challenge. I think when I was in my 50s, I was thinking, well, who can I meet? Who can I work with? What places can I go? Who can we influence? What's happening in politics? All of that stuff. And now I'm much more focused on who lives in the gardens that we live in, who lives in the village that we live in, how are the rest of the family doing, all of that. So I think more and more, that's becoming the genuine focus of my time.
Now, when I introduced the film, I mentioned that you had written 3 Christmas books. That Christmas, the Stocking.
Empty Stocking, which is the twin story. Snow Day, which is Danny's story, yes.
And they all take place the day before Christmas, the day of Christmas, and then Boxing Day. Whose idea was it to bring them together?
Well, actually, it was a friend of mine called Colin. So what happened is he had his kids had been obsessed by the Empty Stocking, the twins story, and he thought it would make a lovely half-hour Christmas special on BBC One, as it were. And I said, oh, that sounds really sweet to me, have a go. And then as he took it out, he kind of got more of a sense of the marketplace. And one of the people he went to was Locksmith, who just made this film, Ron's Gone Wrong, and was run by the lady who made Arthur Christmas. And during like a half-hour discussion between them, they said, well, wait a minute, why don't we do the 3 books? Why don't we, they call it Love Actually for Kids, which is, I think there's refreshingly little nudity in this. But so they came up with it then. They came back to me and said, what do you think? And it was a real challenge because all of the stories had to be doubled up, as it were. They were little stories and they had to be made bigger. So it was actually a really fun script writing thing, and I did it with a friend of mine called Peter. But I think adaptation, I'm sure, is horrible often for people because so much good stuff is taken out, whereas in this we had to add in more.
Now, each book that you wrote, they don't overlap with each other.
No.
And tell us about weaving the stories. Was that a challenge?
That was the fun of it. It was the challenge, but it was fun. So as the little boy in Snow Day, all you really know about is that he's lonely and that his parents don't pay much attention to him. But as it were, in the way that my heart goes, the first thing that would occur to me was that if you were a lonely boy who no one pays attention to, there probably would be a girl that you had a crush on. And then immediately you think, well, wait a minute, this story is about 2 twins who are exactly the same age. So, wow, he can have a crush on one of the 2 girls. So it all, and they'd all go to the same school. If they were that, so that suddenly you're in the school nativity, the Christmas pageant, as it were, together. So it was really fun weaving them in together. I mean, I had done quite a lot of that.
Love Actually.
Well, I know. I mean, certainly Emma Thompson wasn't Hugh Grant's sister, as it were, when I first started writing that film. I just thought it'd be nice for them to have a scene together so that Hugh can learn how to act from Emma.
Miss Trapper I adore her. She's so amazing. In another film, she would have been the villain. Instead, she brings so much pathos and so much just heart to the...
Well, thank you for saying that. I mean, I do think that's, I think one of the jobs in life, and actually I feel it a lot living in the little village we live in, that you, as it were, meet the cliche. You say, well, here's the slightly rowdy builder who's, always charges you too much. Or here's the slightly grumpy woman working in the convenience store. And then Emma, my wife who's here, she knows all their histories. She'll say, well, the reason why Wally behaves that way is because of what his mum was like and everything. And the reason why Rosie seems a bit grumpy is because of what happened to her 3 years ago with. So that I do love the idea that you would look slightly deeper into people, and someone who doesn't seem friendly, there might be a reason, there might be a backstory, and there might be the possibility of some blooming.
One of the things that I love both about Love Actually and this film is that you tapped into unhappiness. I think about the Emma Thompson strain in Love Actually, and Miss Trapper. You go deep into her unhappiness, and I would love to hear you talk about the role of heartbreak in a story that has to deal with Christmas and happiness.
Well, I think life is a mixed bag. I think if we asked all of us how it's going, you'd say, 50-50. 50-50 is a good figure, and we're all pushing upwards. So, I have written a lot of very optimistic movies, but I hope that I've always woven into them that life can be hard, and that in any family in my movie About Time, I said in every family there's a faller. You know, there's one person whose life doesn't roll easy. And so that's always been in any story of a lot of people, it would be peculiar not to represent the fact that sometimes things don't work out and that people need friendship and love and a bit of extra care. So I don't think I could do a film where everybody was happy. Mm-hmm. And whenever somebody's unhappy or needs more, then I have enjoyed over the years with various characters to try and fit them into a community that supports them and get to the bottom of what's, you know, that was the thing about a lot of people did not want the Laura Linney story in Love Actually. It's a bit miserable, but it's actually the closest to my life experience. So I think that I hope it makes, just like you add, you know, herbs to a good pizza. I hope it makes it richer.
No, and you've always shown us in your films that life is messy and that relationships are, you know, complicated, and it's terrific. I wanted. By
the way, Fiona Shaw. Did you all spot that was her? She's the most marvelous English. I mean, I think she was in Harry Potter as well, wasn't she?
Killing Eve.
Killing Eve. She's one of our greatest stage actresses as well. And God, it was one of the great things about animations is you can have the actors you want because they don't have to be available between February the 6th and this particular date. So that it was amazing being able to weave in Brian Cox and Fiona Shaw and Bill Nye and Jodie Whittaker. So that was another thrill of this particular.
How involved were you in the casting?
Oh, very. And the casting was really fun because, I mean, there was quite a lot of auditions for the kids, but a lot of the sort of more experienced actors, they do this gripping thing where they get clips of the actors' voices from different dramas that they've done and play them next to sections of our movie. So they're not saying the right thing, but you see how the voice goes with the characters that you've drawn. And it's really interesting how some actors whose voices you would think sound like this don't sound like that at all when you take away their faces. So that actually the casting was done. I would just sit there and watch 5 great English actors and find out whether or not they were the right actor to play, you know, Santa or Mrs. Trapper or something like that. That was a really slightly surreal but fun.
And I love that, Brian, he's Scottish, he's from the north, and he gets to play Santa, but he's also the narrator. You know, tell us about that.
Yes, we wanted him to be north. It was really between Brian Cox and Stellan Skarsgård. We thought that Santa should be from the north, so he should either be Swedish or, I don't know, any Icelandic actors. But Brian was, in fact, originally in the first draft of the movie, it was narrated by Bill, by the lighthouse keeper.
The light keeper.
Because we thought he can see everything that's going on. But in the end, we got sort of more jokes and more fun out of it. And we made him, as it were, we made Bill the subject of the community and Father Christmas watching from above.
It makes total sense. He has that incredible line, "This is a Christmas that needs a sack full of fixing."
It was fun. And he relishes his... It's funny because Brian tended to come in, you know, a bit grumpy. He's got too famous for his own good now. So he comes and he's complaining, oh, I have to go there, I have to do this, and because I can do it now, I can direct a movie and all of that. But, you know, the moment you got him into the booth, it's so weird. He didn't have to do it, but he becomes Santa, and suddenly it's like he put on a stone, and he starts acting with it. It was really wonderful to see how he couldn't resist doing the job well, even though he was slightly pissed off.
And Bill Nye and you are incredible together. I mean, yeah, if it wasn't for Love Actually, you catapulted his career.
Yeah, but that's such a strange story. We don't have to really talk about so Bill has been in 5 of the last 6 things I've done. And when we were doing, if you've seen Love Actually, he plays this rock star, and I had 2 very, very high-profile ideas for casting it. Very, very famous people. And I hadn't decided which one to go for, so when we had the read-through with the rest of the cast, I said to the casting director, get someone good who I would never cast. And she said, well, Bill Nye's really good. And I said, no, I really don't like Bill Nye. He's a slightly weaselly lefty. I've seen him. He's an annoying actor, but I can see how he might be good for that read-through. And then he did the read-through, and we gave him the part 10 minutes later. But that was a real moment of life being changed by almost literally by luck.
Mm-hmm. And, tell us about him being the lightkeeper and working with him.
Well, he actually lives up there too. He lives
in Suffolk.
Very cutely in this road called Pretty Lane, which is I love that. Yeah, he came in and he knows the accent. One of the problems we did have with the movie was how far could we stretch the reality of the accents. I was very keen that Rhys Darby should be in the movie, who was playing Mr. McNutt, but he can't do a Suffolk accent. And our director, who's a wonderful man called Simon Otto, actually comes from Switzerland, so he couldn't tell the difference which was the accents. So we had to be really careful to get a few proper Suffolk accents, and Bill was one of the few people who actually could do it, because he's always lived there.
Since you brought up Suffolk, I told you outside that I'm a huge fan of your work. And your first film, The Tall Guy, takes place in Camden Town, which you lived in.
Yes.
Then later on you do Notting Hill, and you lived in Notting Hill, and then you live in Suffolk, and then you did Yesterday. What is it about? I guess you write about where you.
A pathetic lack of imagination. That's the thing. No, I mean it is a matter of principle. It's laziness and principle. Because I can sort of say this here, when my first ever experience in the movies was I was asked by a lovely man to write a film. I was in the middle of writing, so no English person asked me, an American asked me to write a film. I had an idea for a film. I wrote it. It was set in Boston. And 3/4 of the way through the process, my temperature went up to 108 and I flew home. And I got sued by MGM, and as it were, in perpetuity. They didn't want a lot of money. They just didn't want me ever to use it again. And the reason was because I didn't know what people had in their fridges in Boston. And I didn't know where they shopped. And I didn't know the texture of the words. And I came home and said, I'm never going to write a film that isn't set in the street in which I live. And that so in fact, The Tall Guy was originally called Camden Town Boy, and Notting Hill is obviously, and 4 Weddings is about all the weddings I went to. So I have a particular kind of not very imaginative imagination, and I think what I try and do is look into the things I know and make them as funny as I can, rather than, as some other wonderful people do, make up amazing things about things they don't know.
And somehow you've been entertaining me all these years by your lack of imagination.
Yes. and oddly enough, I think that's one of the things we're all proud of, and we were trying to do in this film, which is animations have the greatest potential for astonishing world creation. Mm-hmm. And so many masterpieces have been done in that. And you do wonder, though, whether because of that potential, have has animation looked at our real lives quite as much as it might have done, and done wonderful low-key things? Because my favorite animated movie is, the original Charlie Brown Christmas special. And there was a movie, My Life as a Courgette. Is it called that here? My Life as a Zucchini, exactly. We call it courgette in the UK. Yeah. And so we really wanted to do a little movie in animation that looked at little human faces rather than a magnificent, hugely imaginative thing. And when you want to do a little movie set in England, I'm the guy. I'm the guy to go to, because I can't do anything else.
But we're used to seeing animated films where we follow a single hero. This is unique, that you go against the grain. It's actually a whole community that is the lead character. Was that a challenge for you guys?
Well, I think it is it's a type of storytelling that I love. So I think it's a lovely thing to, and that's why I wrote Love Actually, because I so loved Nashville, Shortcuts, Smoke, Pulp Fiction, actually. Do you know what I mean? I love movies with lots of stories in them. Mm-hmm. Isn't that great? Emmy's now my memory. She's not only my wife, she's my memory. It's going to be lovely having her around for the next 10 years. She'll say, "Do you remember that lovely event that we did in Santa Barbara?" I go, "Oh, yes."
Yes. Where we convinced you to move to Santa Barbara so you can write a movie about Santa Barbara with your lack of imagination. Going back to Suffolk, what was it like for you to see this movie is so specific. We feel the town and its coziness and its warmth. What was it like for you to see your town?
Oh, I mean, it was gorgeous as it happened. I mean, my admiration for people in the field of animation is so huge. I mean, I can sort of tell you they're nicer than people in the other type of movies. And I think the reason may be, that they know they have to spend 5 years with each other. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? They really, and it's a really patient and gradual thing. But they were so artistically dedicated. So, the design team, particularly led by Justin, came up and spent, on different occasions, 4-day chunks where they walked around our town, and the detail that they looked. And then when Justin describes it, it's so gripping that he will talk about the fact that you can tell that when walls are fixed in Suffolk, they're fixed cheaper. They don't redo the whole wall. You can just see a little bit of plaster here and some slightly different bricks. So it almost has made me see where I come from in more detail and with more love, because they observed it with such love. And you would never, watching the movie, notice all that. But there's the world building that people in animated movies do is a real, extraordinary dedicated. It's like a sort of, it's like a little Sistine Chapel. It's gorgeous.
There wouldn't be a Richard Curtis film without great pop tunes. And, tell us about incorporating music in your films.
Well, I've always loved that. It used to be the way of when I would sit down with my movies, all movies in the assembly, they're just absolutely ghastly, and you think this will never be a good movie, and the first thing you do is put an hour of pop music you like over it, so it isn't so painful to watch it back, and then you slowly construct it. I mean, that you don't do in this, because in animation, you never have the long version, because you're always aiming for 90 minutes. You don't draw more than that. But it was a joy, and I'm very obsessed by Christmas songs, so I kind of know that Kelly Clarkson one is sort of my favorite one of the last 5 years. And I heard a lovely story that the song When They Find the Little Girl is a very obscure Christmas song, by a woman called Emmy the Great and her boyfriend, and it's called Snowflakes. And apparently she came to the premiere of the movie because she's a friend of one of the actresses without knowing that her song was in the movie. And she made what her friend described as a very undignified sound when it came up. And then the lovely thing is, in the middle of the movie, there's that song, which is a new song that Ed Sheeran wrote. And that is, Ed's a very good friend of ours because he lives in Suffolk. And he heard about the movie, and I just showed him that 3 minutes. And he wrote that song. And
it's 8 minutes.
Thank God.
It's an 8-minute montage.
Well, there we go. He wrote the song, and thank God it turned out all right, because it would have been so hard to say to him, "No, Ed,
but
it's a bad song. We're going to use Coldplay again."
When you wrote the piece, going back to that montage, it's the night before Christmas, and you have all these little vignettes that are happening. Was it conceived as a montage?
No, it wasn't conceived as a montage. In fact, that is true. That was one of the, you have such a long time to have breakthroughs on a movie like this. So yes, we had, before Father Christmas Comes, there were like 8 one-minute scenes, trying to say how sad everyone was, set up the situation, make it clearer. And then we eventually realized that what that was doing was it was making it stodgy before Father Christmas arrived. There was no real sense that he was really needed, because some people were a bit happy and other people were a bit sad. So we did the brave thing and squeezed it all together into, and actually, if you could see the process, 6 months before we locked, I still tried to keep 16 lines, then 14 lines, then 10 lines, then we finally left only kind of 8 of the lines in the scenes.
I quickly glanced at, before the Q&A, the animation that was done, the illustration that was done for your books.
Yes.
Tell us about the way the film was animated. It doesn't match the original illustrations. Is that something that you wanted for?
No, it was so the books are very gorgeously illustrated by this remarkable young English illustrator called Rebecca Cobb. And when I wrote the first book, I looked at so many artists, and then she had submitted to the publisher a book that she'd drawn which had not been published, and I saw those and thought, oh, that's absolutely it. And my assumption was, when it was animated, we were going to use her style, but that style would have been a very 2D, much more like, as it were, the Charlie Brown one, and that was not, as it were, it didn't make commercial sense to make this movie, because it would have been much quirkier, very different, much less expressive in the human faces. They would have had sort of 4 expressions, not 400. So quite early on, I was advised by the producer and the director, I think we should be moving in this direction. And I took their word for it, and I know they were right. But if I would encourage any of you, if you want to have a look at some of the illustrations online from the original, because they're very touching.
There are 2 parts of the story that I find it so funny. The when they're caught in the van, in the blizzard, and then also Danny and the latchkey. Were those part of the original
The
book?
van stuff wasn't at all. So in the book of that Christmas, which is the story about the kids who are left on Christmas Day, the parents just get stranded. And then we stayed with the kids to see what they did. So that was a huge amount of fun, actually, and some great British comic actors playing those dreadful parents. But so, yeah, that was an expanded bit. And then again, yes, with Danny, all you knew was his family didn't know much about him. And in my mind, when I wrote the book, I kind of saw a distant father and a busy mum, but I never thought it through. So it was lovely being able, to think about something I do think about in my sort of charity and social work, which is just the difficulties of, you know, not having a lot of money, having to take care of a child, single mums, the NHS, all of those issues. It was rather lovely for me to be able to bend in that direction, have a little bit of a feeling that
And them all jumping in the ocean at the end.
that's real.
That
That happens every year.
No, but I mean,
unfortunately.
that was part of the books?
No. Again, no. No, about the film is about, I would imagine, 60% the books and about 40% new things.
Because I found that sequence so emotional, and the idea of people jumping in the freezing cold on Boxing
It makes no sense at all. Don't try it. Don't try this at home. But yes, in fact, it's Christmas Day in our village. 150 people all go down to the beach. My kids have always done it. They go. It's so hilarious because it's like, you know, those old movies where you would see it forward and then they'd play it backwards very fast. So you'd see like horses running backwards. That's what it's like. Everybody charges in quite slowly, 150 people, and then they all remember how cold it is, and they all and they're back out and home.
But the way you describe it, we're laughing. But in your movie, I'm even thinking about it, I get teared up.
It is very moving, and it's so sweet, and it's so sweet because obviously now I've reached the point where our children, of all the people we know in the village, they've all gone separate ways, and yet every Christmas, there they are, the one who now lives in Boston and the one who now lives in Glasgow and the one who now lives in Dublin. They're all there as they've been since they were 5-year-olds in their swimming costumes, hugging each other on that beach on Christmas morning. And that's sort of, in a way, what the movie's about. It brings you home.
Last question, and what is it about you and Christmas pageants?
I mean, I have to get something out of all those ghastly experiences. I think that's it. I mean, no, I don't mean that, obviously, but I've been, 4 children, 4 different ages, a lot of experiences, and a lot of wonderful experience. One of the things about being a parent, you'll know, in the last 20 years, has been the abuse of the pop catalogue. I just remember going to see a play about the Battle of Hastings with my boy when he was like 6, and then suddenly at the end, William the Conqueror hold hands with King Harold, and they sang "We Can Work It Out" by the Beatles. And so I love the idea of how they take on board the modern, so Papa Don't Preach would be probably what they would do for Mary and baby Jesus.
Well, for such an untalented man, you have brought so much joy to us. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And
yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for coming on. Emma and I have just come from London, and we are shocked by how nice the weather is. And therefore, we assumed nobody would come because you'd have better things to do. So thank you.
Well, no.
Thank you for coming. That was
thank
adorable.
you, Richard.
Thank
We're
you.
a big fan.
What a lovely,
Yeah.
what a lovely morning.